Welcome to Hindustan Times. My name is Jayashree Nandi. I write on environmental issues for Hindustan Times. Today we have with us two important guests, Mr. George Menezes, Chief Operating Officer, Godrej Electrics and Electricals, and Mr. K.S. Venkatagiri, Executive Director, CII, Sohrabji Godrej Green Business Center. Welcome to the HT Environment Conclave, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Uh, our guests today are going to speak to us about what does the net zero goal mean for the industry sector, what kind of transitions are happening in industries, and what does it mean to the common man. So we'll start our conversation, sir. My first question to you, Mr. George. This is about PM Narendra Modi during the Glasgow Climate Change Conference COP26 last November. He announced a very ambitious climate goal for India. He said that India's non-fossil energy capacity will reach 500 gigawatts by 2030, meeting 50% of the country's energy requirements by then. India will also reduce its total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030, and it will reduce its carbon intensity of its economy by 45% by 2030 over 2005 levels. We've also joined several developed nations now with a net zero goal by 2070. We have a huge task ahead. Just wanted to know from in this context, what does net zero emissions mean, and what will it take to achieve this goal? What role can the industry sector play in this transition?
Thank you, Jayashree. Pleasure to be here on this conclave. Uh, you began with Mr. Modi's declaration, and I think it's very laudable for India to have taken such tall goals. This Panchamrit of Mr. Modi, the 5 points on 500 gigawatts of renewable energy, 50% of a pie of energy to come from renewable, and aiming for net zero by 2020, and the other two goals. I think these are real challenging tasks, but we have no doubt in our mind that India is well on course to deliver on that, because even if you look at our current level of achievement, we are actually done better than what the targets which we had taken. So it was but natural to have gone in for a further stretch. Having said that, I think we must recognize that today, and I must say this line: planet Earth is in distress, and we are all at a defining moment, for humanity. Science today warns us that the impact of climate change is much greater and far-reaching than previously understood. We are seeing all the devastation around us, and it's a wake-up call for all of us, world as a whole, nations at large, businesses individually and collectively. And if we have to keep to the Paris Agreement's goal of 1.5 degrees, it's well within our reach, provided the world aims on a whole to aim for net zero by 2050. Now, we have done the right thing by India taking a goal of 2070, because different countries are at different starting points, and as they use the word, there has to be equity and climate justice. So what goal India has taken for 2070 is absolutely right, and that's the milestone he spoke at Glasgow. But what is important for industry is, now with that milestone, how do we lay out the short-term goals and detailed pathways for 2030, 2040, 2050, so on and so forth. So that's very important. An end destination is in mind, but this is very important. And Indian businesses have a key role to play. Without that, the government will not be enabled. So to meet these nationally determined contributions at the sectoral level, sub-sectoral level, we need to have SDG goals. Corporate India, as I said, has to heighten its ambition and detail out its climate plan and embark on climate action, and it has to be now. So that, I think, is something which we are all cognizant of and have very passionately embarked on. And we'll talk about it as we go further in this discussion.
Sure. Mr. Venkatagiri, what are your thoughts on this? So what are you expecting in the next few years, next 8 years?
Thank you. Thank you, Jayashree. It's a privilege to be part of this discussion, and more so with a person like Mr. George, who have done part of a company which has done exceedingly well on sustainability. You started with our net zero target by 2070. I'm speaking to you from a building, the CII Godrej Green Business Center building located at Hyderabad, which is one of the first net zero buildings in the country. We are a net zero energy building. The building generates more power than what it consumes. So this started as a sort of a demonstration building to create awareness and build the movement in the country. Having said that, our net zero targets of 2070, there is a major role for the industry. Barring agriculture and the domestic consumption, the major emissions come from the industry. So the industry has to do a major role, play a major role in achieving this target. And not only that, apart from playing a major role, it's also a major business opportunity for the entire industry as a whole. You need to create 500 gigawatt of renewable energy. We have to reduce the emissions, which means a lot of technologies have to be created, developed, supplied, serviced. So it's also a major business opportunity for the entire industry. And thirdly, as Mr. George rightly mentioned, we should have, of course, 2070 as the end point of achieving net zero, but we need a lot of sub goals on how it would be by 2030, what it would be like 2040. Many of the industrial sectors have already taken up such goals. Even, for example, Godrej has got a good and green goal with a lot of milestones over a period of time. The Indian cement sector has taken a goal of halving their emissions by 2050. The Indian green building sector has taken a goal of making all the buildings net zero by 2050 with a lot of sub goals. So there has been some good movement in the industry. Industry has taken a lot of initiatives on this net zero agenda, but a lot more needs to be done. I completely agree with you. This is an agenda on which we are on the right path, but things have to be further accelerated in the days to come.
So, a question to both of you, if you can address this, what are the challenges facing the industry sector in reducing emissions? Is it the finance, technology? Do we have the technology to reduce? So, your thoughts on that, if you could elaborate.
So I think one is setting ourselves a huge ambition. I think that has to be the starting point actually. To get industry to set that ambition, and think big. And only when you think big will the action follow. So I think we have to think big. We have to act fast. And as I had mentioned earlier, we need to heighten this ambition and lay down a multitude of initiatives across the value chain. As we embark on this journey of a sustainable development and decarbonization. So I think this is very important. So first and foremost, and I firmly believe this, we need to start by putting a price on carbon. Emissions have to be scrutinized, regulated, and penalized. So there has to be punitive action also. Conversely, extraordinary efforts taken to mitigate and offset need to be celebrated. And this is something which industry must embark on. Secondly, all high impact industries have to prioritize adoption of green standards and green rating system. Mr. Venkatagiri spoke about that, and CII GBC has done path-breaking work in this. Today we have more than 24 green rating standards. So all built environments have to move to net zero buildings on all four dimensions, not only energy, waste, water, and carbon, all four. The third thing is the energy mix has to clearly transit to a dominant component of renewables. In our organization, we have been doing this very meticulously, ensuring that every division of ours is going in for a renewable energy mix. And overall, as a company also, we are targeting 1/3 of our energy today coming from renewable. The fifth thing we have to do is a complete assessment of the life cycle impact of our products and processes. Now, this is a must. Design and build has to be for a circular economy. which does not deplete the planet's resources. And lastly, we need to also drive both efficiency and productivity continuously. Efficiency, whether it is on energy or on other resources, it's extremely important, because finally you are using the planet's resources. So if you become efficient, you're going to conserve, you're going to use less resources. So we have to learn to deliver more with less as we think of nurturing the environment. Yeah.
I think brilliant. It's good to speak after Mr. George Menezes because he has covered all the major issues. That apart, sustainability, net zero should become a part of the regular business agenda of companies. To a large extent, this has already happened in the larger industrial groups. For example, like Godrej, Mahindra, they all have sustainability goals woven into their regular business plan. This has to spread to the entire industry, particularly more so with the small and medium sector. The small and medium sector, they have a difficulty of their immediate issues and problems. So sustainability doesn't hit them that hard immediately. So here, what we must do is to engage in the larger companies should engage with the entire supply chain. For example, you take an industrial sector like automobile or an engineering sector, the amount of emissions which happen in the supply chain is perhaps 20 times or 30 times than that of what happens in the original equipment manufacturer. To just give you again an example of Godrej, the Godrej appliances division, they saved perhaps about 50,000 tons of CO2, while the potential to save in their supply chain was about 5 lakh tons. So the potential to save in the supply chain is extremely high, like what Godrej has done, like what Mahindra has been doing, like what Maruti has been doing. The industry has to engage with the entire supply chain, particularly the small and medium enterprises, so they are also brought into the overall sustainability agenda. Lastly, in terms of energy efficiency, everybody knows you save energy, you save money. So this has to be brought to every one of the sustainability initiatives. In terms of water, in terms of materials, the linkage between sustainability and the business case. You do this is good for the environment, this is also good for you. That awareness has to be brought in, that business model has to set in, so that everybody does it, not just for the sake of environment, but because it's also good for their bottom line. This also has to be, I feel, this also has to be done to engage the SMEs in the sustainability agenda. Thank you.
Yeah. So to expand a bit on that supply chain part, supply chain partners are undoubtedly key stakeholders in the organization's endeavor. And whether it is your raw material, components, product services, inbound logistics, all has a sizable carbon footprint. And we must encompass all supply chain partners, MSMEs, SMEs. In fact, in our own organization, more than 24 of our suppliers who have become a part of a green supply chain are today, Greenco certified. And with the gold and the platinum rating, this is a rating system evolved by CII GBC. And our endeavor is to move to a 100% green supply chain. So this is extremely important because CII also today, other than the Greenco rating, they're also going in for a Green Pro rating, which assesses how green a product is on a global standard framework that covers product design, RM, manufacturing. And it should be our endeavor, I think, to make sure that we take this whole complete, life cycle approach to assess the impact on the environment. So it's extremely important, I think, to focus on these key dimensions which are central to the sustainability strategy of our organization.
So you mentioned technology. I wanted to ask that we have a very ambitious goal of ensuring that the installed renewable energy capacity goes up massively in the next 8 years. But when it comes to translating it to electricity generation, what are the challenges? And we also hear a lot about how technology transfer is not happening from the west. The developed countries countries are not openly sharing technology. Anything on that? Which are the technologies that we need critically to ensure that this transition happens?
So I think it's true that there was a time when going green was good to have. Today we have moved away from that, and today it's a must to have. because increasingly I think consumers are also mindful of the choices which they make, and they're only going to patronize companies in the long run who have this kind of alignment. Because today we must recognize, and to use a very cliched line, green is also lean, and that makes so much imminent sense to consumers. So when you're talking of technological innovation, there are umpteen number of things which need to be done. See, one is clearly the energy transition which we spoke of, which has to move to a renewable energy mix. So all that one needs to do in an organization in terms of those capital outlays and the investments which you have to do. Uh, you know, you need to clearly explore that. Uh, and the fact is, even the scale at which you do makes a lot of difference. For example, the kind of targets which the government took on this LED lighting actually brought down the cost to almost 1/10 for the LED bulbs. And we see now similar trends playing in the battery storage technology, the investment which are going to happen in green hydrogen. So this is something which clearly is happening at a much more global level. Now, if you get down into the specifics at an industry level, uh, and you dissect the processes, you'll find opportunities in so many places. I'll just give you one example. Our company makes appliances, and we are a very large manufacturer of refrigerators and air conditioners. Our air conditioners competed in a global cooling prize instituted by the Rocky Mountain Institute, and it actually we won that. We were one of the finalists because we delivered energy efficiency which was absolutely unprecedented. The energy consumption came down by 80% for the air conditioner. Now that's huge. We have been doing similar things on the process level. If you look at your processes, which energy consuming processes, and then looking at green initiatives, and you'll find application across, like for example, hard to abate sector, whether it is power, cement, petrochemicals. There's so much which we can do. So as a industry, I think we need to look at all these issues very, very closely and see what can be done actually. And the other part also is driven by regulation now with ESG disclosures and BRSR, business reporting and sustainability reporting, which is mandated by SEBI for the top 1,000 companies. This is also going to play a major role in the kind of investments which will flow in this space. Yeah.
So adding on to what
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
Adding
go
on to
ahead.
what Mr. George Menezes said, he said green is lean. Green is also healthy. You stay in a green building, you have better health, and the spread of infection is also significantly lower. Speaking
Yes.
about RE, yes, I think we have come a long way. There are difficulties as we go further forward in terms of storage technologies. A lot of technologies are evolving, and maybe in a few years' time, we might have a system by which we are able to supply uninterrupted power with renewable energy as the basis. With green hydrogen and storage technologies coming in, I think the day is not far off.
Right.
Yeah,
Uh, Sir, wanted to ask both of you that now, till a few years ago, about 10 years ago, this was all a part of CSR. You did something related to sustainability. You would boast saying that, oh, we are doing this and this is a part of our CSR initiative. But now it seems to be a necessity simply because the government is aligned. And in fact, globally, all countries will have to take emission cuts and will have to move towards a low carbon economy. So, do you expect any regulations going forward to ensure that every sector meets this goal?
So already, I think there is a regulatory framework which is already in place, and maybe as we go forward, it may only get tightened. I just alluded to this concept of you know carbon pricing. Many of the organizations have adopted it voluntarily today, but going forward, who knows? I mean, there could be mandates around that. Uh, so I think the regulatory environment initially focused on voluntary adoption, And slowly they kept on tightening it. For example, when the energy labeling program was launched for appliances, it was initially voluntary, and then it became mandatory. And not only that, further on they started tightening it after every 2 years. A 5-star of today becomes a 4-star 2 years down the line. That's the right path in which one has to move. Other than that, I think the Green Building Center, which Mr. Venkatagiri heads, and the Indian IGBC, Indian Green Building Council, they keep on coming up with rating systems. Today, there are more than 24 rating systems for the built environment. Now they are also talking of wellness, rating system, the well rating system by International Well Building Institute and IGBC Health. These are also now gaining popularity post the pandemic. So I think I see clearly the regulatory environment becoming tighter and market transformation happening because consumers are going to demand green products. Consumers are going to patronize environment conscious, environment friendly companies because it also makes a lot of imminent sense. So what is ecological is also going to become economical as well. Yeah.
So adding on, I completely agree with you. What started off as voluntary now has become the government also is trying to play an active role. The role is in terms of two types of regulations. One, you incentivize those things which are good. For example, many of the state governments, municipalities are giving incentives for green building. You can have an additional floor surface area if you have a green building in certain parts of the country. Nearly about 16, 17 states are doing that. The Rajasthan state government has said if it is a green manufacturing company, they get an additional incentive in terms of number of years of operation, and the license for consent to operate gets extended by a year. So these are some positive type of regulations which are coming up. Coming in terms of capping, yes, that also could happen. For example, Government of India has come out with a regulation that if you are putting up a new cement plant, you have to have, say, 0.63 tons per ton of cement. That should be the target with which the entire cement plant has to be developed, designed. So the same type of regulation could come in for the other industries too. It's just a matter of time. But it would be a combination of both positive as well as baseline regulations, so that everybody goes up by a certain level, and those who are good get incentivized to develop further.
Jayashree, initially we may have to give some incentives, but later on, I think if it has to stand on its own feet, then I think it also has to make imminent business sense, actually.
Absolutely.
And we see clearly that happening, actually.
That is something that I wanted to ask. On one hand, if there is a price on carbon, then there will automatically be a push. There will be a push to decarbonizing. But where do you see the money coming from for this kind of a large scale transition? Who is going to fund these transitions? Is there finance? Because I think the capital cost would be high, right? I just wanted to understand from you, both of you.
Yeah. So I think clearly, I think
Also the green bonds are concept of green bonds useful.
yeah. So I think talking of financing. See, first of all, I think if I just get down to at the operational level, you see any capex which is sanctioned in an organization. Normally, there is a payback calculation which is done. Whether this capital will pay, or not. Now, nobody factors in the carbon price into payback calculations. The moment you start doing that, that in itself, I think, ensures, the attractiveness for that investment. For example, if a technology is going to significantly bring down its carbon footprint, and that benefit is factored into the payback calculation, then the capex goes through. The second thing, if you look at even at the at a more holistic level, one definitely needs a regulatory framework that aligns financial systems to the sustainable agenda of the country. the capital that we allocate today will shape the ecosystems and the production and consumption patterns of tomorrow. So the green financing has to support public sector in creating that enabling environment, and also promote both private and public partnerships on financing mechanisms. Now, green bonds, which I think they spoke of in the budget, I think is one such example. The second thing also which we need to do, since we are talking financing, if this has to percolate down to the lower levels, then one needs to also build capacity of community enterprises for promoting microcredit. So there is a role for all three entities: government, business, and citizen. Government, as we said, has to create the regulatory framework and institutional setup and define the tariffs, subsidies, and guarantees. Businesses, besides chipping in with their own financial share, have to drive the technical innovation and process management and establish forward and backward linkages which integrate with the system. And lastly, for citizens who patronize the products and services, we have to create the willingness to pay, which will only come from awareness, education, and a change to moving to an environment-friendly lifestyle.
Yeah, I completely agree. Echo Mr. George Menezes' views. Finance is a major issue where we need there's something which need to be addressed. Particularly things like energy efficiency and renewable energy have a very strong business case. So, the regular financing itself might be able to take care of it. But beyond that, we need some supportive financing schemes for encouraging people to take up sustainability in a big way. Maybe reduce interest rates for those technologies which are not economically very attractive, but still are needed from climate point of view, for green buildings, for green companies, for somebody to become net zero, more so for the small, medium enterprises. Financing schemes have to be evolved both by the normal financial institutions as well as some newer instruments like green bonds, which have to come into the market. And lastly, as Prime Minister Modi spoke about, he spoke about $1 trillion in the next one decade to come from the developed countries to the developing countries. This is very, very, very important. If large-scale implementation has to take place, and that too within a short period of time, this money has also to come to developing countries such as India, so that the progress is faster. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, to both of you. This was really, really useful. We learned a lot about what's going on internally in terms of transition for industries. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. Privileged to be part of this discussion. Thank you.